Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly behind the bamboo curtain of Ming Dynasty China, not to witness emperors or warriors, but to shadow someone far more exhausted. You. You're a low to mid-ranking bureaucrat, clinging to your official robe and your reputation like a soggy rice scroll. The moon still hangs pale and cold above the rooftops of your provincial compound, and roosters are just beginning to clear their throats. You stir on your woven mat, already dreading the weight of the day ahead and the shoes that never quite fit. Oh, and by the way, you probably won't survive this. Not because it's dangerous, exactly, but because the sheer tedium might dissolve your soul. Or maybe the fermented bean curd at breakfast will get you first. Who's to say? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. I'm always curious about who's tuning in across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air smells like damp stone and boiled cabbage, and your bones are protesting with a dignified ache as you sit upright. The sleeping quarters are no palace. Plaster walls, a wobbly wooden table, and that infernal inkstone you tripped over in the dark just last week. You grope for your official cap, already crushed at one side from where your nephew sat on it during a festival. The first duty? Robe. Heavy. Cotton. Stiff. You wiggle your arms through like a disgruntled eel and fasten the sash, embroidered with exactly the correct insignia for a 6th rank official. The Ming Dynasty is many things, but forgiving about wardrobe violations is not one of them. A loose collar is not a fashion choice. It's a reprimand waiting to happen. Outside, a junior clerk is already sweeping the courtyard. His broom slaps the stones like a metronome, marking your stress levels. You nod at him with what you hope is calm authority, though you know your hair is sticking up in at least 3 directions. No time for grooming. There are already scrolls being piled at your study door. Inside the main hall of your compound, the day begins with ritual. A brief incense lighting. 2 bows toward the ancestral tablet. 1 toward the portrait of the emperor, who, you remind yourself, has never met you and never will, unless you do something spectacularly right or catastrophically wrong. Your steward arrives, eyes puffy from sleep, to present you with today's docket. It's a thick one. You've got a tax discrepancy in the Southern District, a merchant bribery complaint that absolutely no one wants to touch, and a wedding dispute involving 2 families and 1 allegedly cursed duck. That last one will not be pleasant. We're short. The steward, in his usual mumbling way, also mentions the grain inspector is delayed. Again, and your 3rd cousin is requesting another letter of recommendation. The 3rd this month. You'd laugh if your mouth weren't busy chewing a stick of dry ginger. The bureaucrat's morning is sacred in its repetition. You shuffle to the outer office, where clerks unroll scrolls like gamblers flipping cards. 1 clerk is already sweating over a draft memorial to the prefecture. You glance at it. Too much flattery, not enough fact. Classic. Historians still argue whether Ming officials had real influence or were just glorified messengers. You suspect the truth lies somewhere between. You can direct irrigation funds, yes, but you can't stop the governor's nephew from stealing them. That's above your rank. And let's be clear, it's all about rank. From the badge on your chest to the arrangement of your furniture. Even your chair is slightly smaller than your superiors, by design. You once saw a colleague demoted for placing his desk on a platform. Symbolic arrogance, they called it. You just call it back pain. You glance out the window. The sun is rising now, casting long, golden beams across the compound wall. A cicada chirps, a sound that, somehow, already gives you a headache. You take a deep breath. The scent of lotus tea wafts in, or perhaps it's just the laundress boiling river reeds again. Then comes the ritual you hate most, the morning foot inspections. No, not yours. Your guards. Regulations require you to check that all your house staff wear regulation shoes. Yes, even shoes. Heaven forbid a servant show up in sandals on a Thursday. You pass by your gatekeeper and nod. He lifts his robe like a sheepish debutante and reveals, mercifully, well-worn but approved black-soled slippers. Good man. Of course, the real trouble starts when a local bailiff shows up unannounced, requesting 5 oxen, 3 carpenters, and 1 calligrapher for an emergency construction at the temple. You squint at his written request, which looks suspiciously like a recycled scroll from last month. You recognize the soy sauce stain. Emergency, he says, wiping his brow theatrically. The roof leaks. So does your script, you reply. He doesn't laugh. You'll have to sort this. Again, outside, the town is coming alive. Carts rattle by, merchants shout, and a rooster attempts a crow that sounds like a dying flute. You glance toward the gate. A young scholar is waiting there, clutching a folder of poems, hopeful for an audience. His face is earnest. His robe is patched. His writing, you suspect, will be terrible. Still, you let him in, because once not too long ago, that was you, nervous, hungry, and convinced your calligraphy would change the empire. Instead, here you are, ink stains on your sleeves, a mild case of gout, and the sinking realization that you have no time to read poetry. Not today. You wave the clerk over. Tell him to return tomorrow. You murmur. Bring a shorter poem, and then it's back to the scrolls. One by one, like tidal waves of handwriting, they crash into your day. Breakfast is supposed to be a quiet moment, right? A chance to sit on a creaky stool, blow steam off your rice porridge, and maybe chew through a pickled plum before your brain turns to paperwork mush. But no, this is the Ming bureaucracy. Even your breakfast comes with political tension thick enough to chew. You've barely lifted your bowl when Assistant Secretary Lin appears at your elbow like a suspicious shadow. His robe is immaculate, his eyebrows furrowed in the permanent expression of someone who always smells something off, usually your decision-making. Have you seen the new petition from the salt merchants? He asks before you can even swallow. You nod vaguely, spoon halfway to your mouth. The porridge is already cooling. I'll look at it after I eat, you mutter. You should look at it before the magistrate does, he says, voice smooth as lacquer. Translation: the magistrate's son is tied to the Salt Guild, and if you screw this up, you'll be assigned to monitor beet farming in some swampy province where mosquitoes are the dominant life form. The porridge? Still untouched. The tea? Lukewarm now. The pickled plum? It rolled off the table while Lin was talking. You shift over to the writing table with a sigh, sliding your inkstone closer. Every bureaucrat has their own technique for recentering their mind in the morning. Some breathe deeply. Some recite Confucian lines. You tap your brush against the ceramic rim 3 times. Once for clarity, once for luck, once to make sure you're actually awake. Time to begin the morning brushwork. Scroll after scroll unrolls like a slow-motion avalanche. Some petitions are laughably bad, like the villager requesting permission to marry his deceased cousin's widow and her goat. Others are delicate, loaded with land disputes, inheritance twists, and occasional accusations of sorcery. You once spent 3 weeks sorting out whether a neighbor's dead crops were cursed or just the result of him being really, really bad at farming. And the worst part? Everything has to be answered properly, respectfully, with the correct honorifics and the right grade of ink. If you mix up an esteemed village elder with a respected agricultural headman, you may as well start packing. You scratch out line after line, the calligraphy tightening as your wrist complains. The brush itself was a gift from a retired judge, excellent quality, if a bit moody. Sometimes it flows like a dream. Sometimes it drips like a guilt-tripped chicken. By mid-morning, you're dealing with council matters. This is where the real sport begins. In the main hall, a semicircle of officials sits on lacquered benches. Everyone's back is too straight, everyone's expression too serene, and everyone hates each other just a little bit. You take your place, nod politely at senior officer whose robe is always 2 shades too flashy for his rank. You'd accuse him of bribery, if you weren't reasonably sure he'd respond by leaking that one drunken poem you wrote about tax reform. The clerk reads today's first item, a rice storage request from a district still recovering from flood damage. Important, practical, should be approved. Instead, Goose smirks and says, "But do we know which family's rice was damaged?" Everyone freezes. There it is. Politics in action. Because, of course, the rice belongs to the Sioux clan, and the Sioux clan backed the wrong prefect in last spring's waterworks scandal. If you speak up in favor of the request, you're siding with them. If you don't, you're cruel. The perfect bureaucratic trap. You clear your throat. Surely, you say carefully, we ate our farmers first, and argue about family trees second. There's a pause. Then a few murmurs of agreement. Gwo doesn't smile, but he does stop sharpening his fingernail with that jade ring of his. A small victory. You'll take it. A historian might note that Ming Dynasty officials frequently faced this kind of friction. Inter-clan rivalry, veiled jabs, and intricate status dances. But that doesn't capture the sheer absurdity of it. Just last month, 2 clerks argued for an hour over whether a particular bird used in a poem was a crane or an egret. The poem was anonymous. And yet, these petty squabbles matter. They define careers. They define yours. By the end of the council meeting, you've managed to approve 3 local projects, delay 1 land reassignment, and discreetly avoid mentioning your opinion on the magistrate's new cultural initiative, which mostly involves hiring his cousin to paint peach blossoms on public latrines. You return to your quarters for a breath, only to find your brush stand has collapsed under the weight of new documents. Again, a sea of bamboo scrolls. One of them, is the merchant petition Lynn mentioned. You unroll it with suspicion. It reads reasonably, too reasonably, full of respectful language, detailed logistics, and glowing references to your leadership. You spot the problem instantly. No one compliments you this much unless they're hiding something. You'll need to assign a clerk to verify their tax logs, preferably one who doesn't get confused when faced with double columns and smudged ink. You jot a quick note, seal the scroll, and bam, something explodes outside your door. You jump. It turns out to be a falling lantern. A servant carrying a breakfast tray for the scribe trips, and fried turnip cakes go flying like greasy missiles. A small dog snatches one midair. You stare. The servant freezes. The dog wags its tail proudly. This is your life. Somewhere in the compound, a gnarled old gardener is cackling. Eventually, you return to your study. The sun is climbing higher, and the shadows under your eyes are starting to look permanent. A scholar once said that true discipline is writing by sunlight and moonlight both. He clearly never had a gout flare-up or a court date with a goose thief. The tea, you realize, is still untouched, and the pickled plum, still on the floor. The sound of the gong echoes through the compound like a low moan from a sick ox. It's time for the daily hearings. You sigh, roll your shoulders, and prepare yourself to play the most exhausting of your many roles. Public judge, reluctant therapist, and underpaid lightning rod for every grievance in a 12-mile radius. You step out into the morning sun, which is already too bright for how little sleep you got, and take your seat in the main courtyard under the ceremonial canopy. Two junior clerks arrange your paperwork like it's sacred scripture. It is not. It is mostly complaints about chickens, fences, or chickens trespassing on fences. A bell chimes, and the first petitioner steps forward, a wiry man with one eyebrow and zero chill. He's here to accuse his neighbor of stealing his wheelbarrow and his wife's affection. The wheelbarrow had sentimental value, he wails. You nod solemnly and glance at the neighbor, who looks like he regrets every life decision since breakfast. Do you have the wheelbarrow? You ask. Yes, he mutters. And the wife? Also yes. Well, you say, scribbling something that looks judicial, you'll return the wheelbarrow. But the wife? The man pleads. You shake your head. Beyond this court's jurisdiction, it's barely 10 a.m., and already things are unraveling. Throughout the morning, the line snakes around the compound walls. Peasants, merchants, beggars, monks, even one old woman carrying a bundle of hedgehogs in a basket. They curse my dreams, she insists. You write a referral to the apothecary. One man complains that his neighbor's laundry drips into his koi pond. Another claims someone stole his fish and replaced them with identical, but less spiritual koi. You resist the urge to bang your head against your writing desk. Still, this is the job. For all its absurdities, the courthouse is the place where people bring their deepest fears and smallest slights. Historians still argue whether Ming bureaucrats truly served the people or simply maintained appearances. But here, face to face with these grimy, passionate villagers, you can't help but feel needed. And occasionally, something serious cuts through the nonsense. Like the case of the orphan girl brought forward by the village elder. She's been living with an uncle who, let's just say, isn't big on compassion or basic hygiene. She won't speak, just stares down at her sandals. You lean forward gently. Do you want to stay with your uncle? You ask. She shakes her head so hard her hairpins rattle. You look at the elder. He's old but upright, with that rare gleam of responsibility in his eyes. We'll begin the paperwork, you say. The clerk nods. It'll take a week, maybe 2, but the girl will be transferred. A small victory, tucked between fish lawsuits and ghost chickens. Speaking of chickens, they return in the form of an actual poultry theft case. 2 men stand, red-faced and yelling over each other. You hold up a hand. Please, one at a time. Who had the chicken first? He did, the taller man shouts, pointing. But I raised it from a chick. He only borrowed it. For 3 years, the other retorts. A debate ensues, complete with chicken imitations, moral philosophy, and the sudden appearance of the chicken itself, flapping into the courtyard like a squawking witness to its own trial. The clerks chase it down. You assign it, temporarily, to the temple. Justice is strange like that. You take a short break under a tree. A breeze stirs your robe, and the sun has softened slightly. You sip water tea from a clay cup and rub the bridge of your nose. Sir, a junior officer says the traveling monk has returned. You groan inwardly. The monk, master one, is not technically a local resident, and therefore not technically your jurisdiction. But he keeps showing up with scrolls of prophecies, complaints about noisy crickets, and unsolicited thoughts on your karma. Today, he brings a dilemma. A rooster is crowing at night, he announces. It is a sign of what, you ask? He considers. Possibly that someone is hiding imperial documents in their outhouse. You blink. Do you have evidence? He holds up a chicken feather. You nod slowly. We'll look into it. He beams and sits in the shade to drink your tea. Not helpful, but at least he's quiet. By mid-afternoon, the sun casts long, thin shadows across the tiled floor. The line of petitioners has thinned, though one small boy approaches nervously. He's holding a paper fan, hastily painted with characters. Please release my father. Your clerk whispers. The boy's father was fined heavily for late rice delivery. You glance at the records. The harvest was disrupted by locusts, not negligence. You adjust the fine, quietly. No fanfare, no scribes making notes. Just a correction made before the ink dries too much. You send the boy home with a handful of walnuts from your pouch. You haven't had time to eat them anyway. Of course, the last petitioner of the day is the worst. A local merchant, flush with coin and confidence, arrives complaining that a rival's warehouse has blocked the wind from his private meditation garden. He demands imperial compensation. You take a deep breath. The wind, you say slowly, is not under your ownership. It was before the warehouse. You scribble a response, vaguely referencing Taoist non-attachment and municipal zoning. He huffs, but accepts it. Just another day balancing sense, superstition, and staggering egos. As the final scroll is sealed and the last scribe yawns himself into silence, you stand and stretch. Your joints pop like old furniture. You've mediated 16 arguments, reviewed 23 petitions, and successfully avoided stepping in goose droppings. Quirky fact. During parts of the Ming era, especially in rural counties, magistrates were expected to also host puppet shows to convey new regulations. You've thankfully dodged that duty so far. Still, you sometimes wonder, what would your puppet look like? Probably hunched, bleary-eyed, and muttering legal phrases in iambic tetrameter. You chuckle to yourself as you return to your quarters. But the day's far from over. The sun has reached its most merciless angle, blazing down on your compound like a bureaucratic magnifying glass. The tiled roof radiates heat with enough malice to warp parchment, and your underlayers are now clinging in ways that cannot possibly be dignified. You fan yourself with a requisition form. Probably not allowed, but no one is watching. Unfortunately, the midday heat also brings the midday headaches. You've barely sat down in your shaded study when a clerk shuffles in, his expression halfway between apology and full-blown panic. Sir, he whispers, the tax ledgers have gone missing. You stare at him. Which tax ledgers? You ask, dread already blooming like mold on a damp rice bag. The grain records, he says, and visibly flinches. You resist the urge to throw your inkstone across the room. Those records were due to the prefect this week, and without them, you'll look either corrupt or incompetent. Probably both. A lesser man might weep. You just sigh. Find them. Quietly. He nods and bolts. You're not new to this game. Lost records are as common as rice husks in your tea. Sometimes it's innocent. A misplaced bundle, a distracted clerk. Other times, not so much. The higher up you climb, the more people treat documents like currency. Misplace one, and suddenly a cousin's estate is mysteriously untaxed. Historians still argue whether the Ming bureaucratic system's obsession with paperwork created more order or more chaos hiding inside order? You, soaked in both ink and sweat, are firmly in the latter camp. You crack open a replacement scroll and start drafting a very delicate letter. The sort that says, "Don't worry, everything's fine," while subtly screaming, "We are on fire." Then your steward returns, bearing not news of the grain ledger, but lunch. You lift the lid on a lacquered tray. A scoop of wilted greens, 3 cold dumplings, and something that might have been tofu in a past life. There is no joy here. You eat it anyway. A knock at the door. You grunt in response, mouth full of ancient soy sauce. It's the junior tax examiner, face glistening like a steam bun. "Sir, there's a complaint. A goose thief." You pause. "Another one?" He nods. The farmer says the goose is unique. It responds to flute music. This should not surprise you. Last year, someone claimed a pig could predict eclipses. You rise with a groan and head back to the hearing room. Really just a long bench with enough sweat stains to qualify as historical. The farmer is waiting, goose cradled like a newborn. The accused thief stands nearby, arms folded and smirking. You listen. You try not to sweat onto the scroll. You eventually propose a test. The accused must play a tune. If the goose dances, maybe he's telling the truth. The flute is borrowed. The tune is generous to call musical. But the goose does bob its head. Still, you say slowly, a goose's choreography does not constitute legal ownership. You order the animal returned and suggest the farmer invest in a fence and perhaps a less talented goose. The tax examiner chuckles. You don't. Back at your desk, the missing ledgers remain missing. You review other tasks to distract yourself. One memorial from the capital contains an exciting new proposal for counting village pigs more efficiently. You resist the urge to doodle mustaches on the officials' names. In this heat, the ink dries strangely. It cracks as you write. You dab water on the brush, but your fingers tremble slightly. Not from nerves, just exhaustion. The kind that seeps into your marrow. You glance at the bronze mirror in the corner. You look older than you did this morning. To stay awake, you review a side file. Marriage contracts. One includes a clause that the husband must never speak ill of his mother-in-law during rain. You blink. You read it again. Another has a postscript. Groom must agree to accept cat as household deity. You set that one aside for future consideration. Outside, a sudden shout, then a loud splash. You stand, rush to the balcony, and discover 2 scribes drenched in pond water. Apparently, one accused the other of hoarding ink sticks, and the dispute escalated into a full-body shove. Now both are covered in lily pads and shame. You dispatch the steward to deal with it. No injuries? You ask. Only to dignity, he replies. Unrecoverable, you murmur. As the afternoon wears on, you try to write a report summarizing the day's hearings. Halfway through, your brush splits. You switch to another, which immediately leaks. You finally settle on one that smells faintly of fermented plum wine. You don't ask why. A breeze drifts in at last. You almost cry with gratitude until it knocks over your stack of unfinished scrolls. You spend the next 10 minutes crawling under your desk, resorting petitions by footprint shape. Eventually, the steward returns with good news. The grain ledgers have been found, buried in the herb storage. Of course they were. He offers no explanation. You offer no lecture. You simply accept that sometimes, in the Ming Dynasty, documents wander off like rebellious children and reappear only when offered dried goji berries and a cool shelf. By now the sky has turned a gentler shade of blue, hinting that the cruelest part of the day is over. You take a moment to sit by the garden, breathing in the faint scent of camellia and ink. Insects chirp in the bushes. A crane glides overhead, slow and elegant. You don't know it yet, but tomorrow you'll have to find someone for painting that crane on a shop sign without proper artistic licensing. For now, you let your shoulders drop. Your eyes close briefly. The headaches will return, but so will the wind. The world smells like ink, dust, and disappointment. Again, you're back in your study, slouched slightly, because what's posture when your spirit has already curled into a ball, surrounded by the only thing more numerous than complaints: documents. Long, whisper-thin sheets of bamboo and silk paper flutter like judgmental ghosts. Most of them say, in various euphemisms, "Fix this problem," or more ominously, "Explain yourself." Because now it's time for the bureaucrat's true battlefield: paperwork. A historian once described Ming officialdom as 1,000 pens bleeding onto the bones of the empire. Very poetic, very accurate. Except he forgot to mention that half the pens are held by overambitious rivals and the other half by cousins who cannot spell. Today's first order of business? Memorials. Memorials are not flowery tributes. They are reports. Proposals. Confessions. Apologies. Sometimes all four in one scroll. Each must be formatted just so, with the correct folds, the proper tone, and this part is crucial, a flair for flattery that stops just short groveling. You begin one, a routine summary of tax collection in your district. Opening lines: your humble servant, though unworthy to even gaze toward the eastern glow of the heavenly countenance, offers this meager report. You stop, sigh, and crumple it. Too groveling. You try again. With utmost reverence and the trembling fingers of a loyal ant in your vast celestial garden. Still too much. You finally settle on, respectfully submitted by your low-ranking official, dedicated to the harmony of the realm and the cleanliness of ledgers. That'll do. You hope. Writing is only part of the pain. Cross-checking figures is the real nightmare. You hold a tally sheet close to your lantern. The numbers wiggle slightly. You blink. Are they moving? You press the parchment to your forehead. Definitely still numbers. Unfortunately, the scroll from Assault District looks suspicious. Their reported revenue has increased 15%, while claiming a flood destroyed 3 outposts. You scribble a note to double-check their inventory and maybe triple-check their morals. Historians still argue whether the Ming Dynasty's elaborate bureaucracy was a model of meritocracy or a bloated ink-scribbling hydra. You're currently leaning toward hydra. With gout, you shift to reviewing incoming edicts. One commands you to ensure all district temples are painted in imperial apricot. Another asks for a survey of local car production. A third informs you that horse dung theft is now classified as agricultural misappropriation. You jot down one word: why? Then it's on to requests for promotions, marriage licenses, tax exemptions, ceremonial dancers for festivals, and a bizarre letter from a minor poet offering to rename your village's outhouses Chambers of Serenity. You almost approve that one, just for fun. You pause for tea. The pot is cold. The leaves have formed what appears to be a disappointed face. You drink it anyway. Midway through the next memorial draft, you hear a knock. It's Assistant Clerk Ping, face pink with embarrassment. "Sir," he mutters. Someone returned a scroll. "Said it was haunted." You raise an eyebrow. He hands you the offending document. It's your report on irrigation maintenance. You unroll it and see, yep, one splotch of ink vaguely shaped like a weeping ghost. You turn it toward the light. Looks more like a donkey. You say, They disagree. You toss it aside. Send it again. This time with a blessing stamp. Ping bows and retreats. You attempt to return to work, but get sidetracked by a ledger with 2 entries marked and 1 written entirely in the margins. You want to fire someone. You also want noodles. Neither is immediately available. You glance at the hourglass. Still daylight. Just barely. You move on to audit forms. The Treasury records list an outgoing miscellaneous expense of 300 coins for event security. You remember the event. It was your cousin's opera recital. You cross out the item and scrawl on the margin. Find out if cousin counts as cultural ambassador. The stack of paperwork doesn't shrink so much as reshape. Like a hungry mountain, you discover, near the bottom, a complaint scroll submitted directly to the capital. Someone, a minor landowner with too much ink and not enough friends, has accused you of unreasonable taxation, favoritism in lantern distribution, and the most serious offense of all, refusing to attend a poetry night. You frown. That last one might actually stick. You start drafting a rebuttal. It's hard to defend against accusations you suspect are mostly true. You do tax his estate more harshly, but only because he breeds peacocks that scream at night. You did favor one village with extra lanterns, but they hosted a festival that didn't set anything on fire. And yes, you skipped his poetry night. You value your sanity. You write a response that balances contrition with veiled exasperation. While this servant humbly regrets any perceived oversight, he was advised by celestial instinct and the sound of peacocks to decline that evening's cultural gathering. It'll probably get flagged, but you feel better. As the sun fades, the brush in your hand grows heavier. You flex your fingers. They crackle like dry bamboo. You pause to scribble something in the corner of your ledger. Buy new ink brush. Burn old one. In the hallway, a junior scribe sings softly while copying a border inspection notice. The melody is soothing, off-key, and utterly unintelligible. You leave him alone. His mother sends you pastries. And then, buried deep in a pile of poorly folded scrolls, you find it. A list of new civil service exam results. Dozens of names. Most you don't recognize. But one leaps out, your nephew. He passed. Top third. You smile. Not because it guarantees his future, but because it means you don't have to forward a reference letter next month. There's a quiet knock. Your steward enters, bearing a tray with sesame cakes and a fresh pot of tea. You forgot to eat lunch, he says gently. You nod. I remember dinner, he adds. You glance at the sky. It's night now. The stars are faint behind a sheen of cloud. The paperwork will still be here tomorrow. It always is. You take the sesame cake. It crumbles perfectly. You sip the tea. Huh. Spiced. Possibly blessed by a ghost. For now, the scrolls rest. So do you. Evening in your compound doesn't mean peace. It just means a shift in the kind of chaos. You've swapped your daytime robe for your formal blue banquet set, embroidered with phoenixes that look more like startled ducks, and are now heading toward the garden hall for an official feast. You're starving, but you know better than to expect a relaxing meal. Banquets, in your line of work, are less about food and more about surviving social landmines in silk slippers. The candles are already lit, their warm glow flickering over a table stacked with delicacies. Lacquered eel, lotus seed dumplings, roasted duck, pickled melon, and something that might be jellyfish or just poorly prepared radish. The aroma is divine, but so is the tension. You're greeted by Prefect Wu, whose mustache is the only thing sharper than his tone. Ah, our diligent ink slinger, he chuckles. Tell me, did the rice farmers cry more than usual this week? You smile tightly. Only the ones who read their tax notices. He laughs a little too loudly and claps you on the back with the force of a rice thresher. The room is full of characters you know all too well. Scholar Lou, who quotes the Analects while aggressively chewing. Merchant Joe, who somehow always sits exactly next to whoever's in charge of trade permits. And Assistant Judge Shun, who hasn't said anything memorable since the plum pudding scandal of last autumn. You're seated between two minor nobles whose favorite hobbies include veiled insults and complaining about the weather. They open strong with, "Your sleeves are quite modest. Are they standard now for outer provinces?" You thank them for noticing and suggest they try living somewhere with actual bandits. Banquets in the Ming Dynasty are high theater, equal parts food, flattery, and political fencing. Everyone pretends not to be angling for a promotion, while also bringing exactly the gifts, stories, and jokes to make themselves unforgettable. You're aiming to be just memorable enough not to be forgotten, but not so memorable they ask you to organize something. The servers glide in with soup. It smells fantastic, but you've learned to be cautious. Last month, someone slipped you emperor mushroom broth, which turned out to contain a mild hallucinogen, and you spent the evening trying to explain tax law to a broom. This one tastes fine. Probably. You offer a small toast. Something humble, literary, and devoid of opinions. To the harvest, to the harmony of neighbors, and to eels that don't bite. Polite laughter. Not bad. Then the gifts come out. Because, of course, this banquet isn't just social. It's transactional. One by one, low-level merchants and upwardly mobile farmers present small tokens to the prefect and, casually, to you. A carved turtle figurine, a silk pouch of dried persimmons, a fan painted with plum blossoms, and what you hope isn't an original poem. You accept them with the right amount of humble hesitation. But inside, the calculations begin. Is this a bribe? An innocent gesture? A poisoned chalice? Historians still argue whether such gift-giving in the Ming was institutionalized corruption or just cultural courtesy taken way too far. You're leaning toward both. The trick is knowing what to accept. That silk pouch? Safe. The poem? Suspicious. The jade pendant wrapped in a handkerchief that looks like it came from the governor's wife's seamstress? That's going straight to the evidence box. Just as you start to relax, someone brings out the rice wine. Oh no, a drinking round begins. Toasts fly fast. To ancestors, to prosperity, to well-dug irrigation ditches. Your cup is refilled faster than you can say, "I'd rather not." You nurse your drink, offering long-winded compliments to the local opera troupe's recent performance. You didn't see it. And subtly pushing rice in your mouth to soak up the alcohol. It's a delicate dance. Drink too little, you're rude. Drink too much, you'll wake up with a new position or a demotion. Halfway through the second course, the rumors begin to bubble up. You overhear snatches. Did you hear about the land surveyor in Tianzhou? Falsified every grain count. Word is a new tax commissioner might be appointed. Young. No family ties. I heard the emperor's astrologer predicted a shift in the southern prefectures. Everyone speaks in riddles. No one ever says what they actually mean. But you trained in this language. It's one part prophecy, 2 parts gossip, and one giant dollop of career sabotage. You sip, smile, and pretend not to understand anything. Meanwhile, your brain is threading connections like a spider on a deadline. Then comes the food mishap. A server trips, an honest mistake, and dumps an entire plate of red bean cakes onto the judge's lap. He goes pale, not from embarrassment, but because his robe is white silk. You expect outrage, but instead, the judge smiles and everyone else laughs. Too quickly, you see what's happening. Someone's taking him down a notch, subtly, and he's playing along to seem unaffected. You file this moment away. Someone in this room has claws and knows how to use servers as weapons. You eat your own bean cake quietly. After the third round of wine, things blur. Scholar Lou recites something heartfelt and confusing. Merchant Joe insists the local shrine smells more righteous since he made a donation. Someone plays the flute, badly, but you keep your posture, keep your calm, because a slip of the tongue at a banquet is the kind of thing that appears in official rumors by morning. Eventually, people begin to drift away. Faces flushed, voices louder. You thank the prefect, compliment the chef, and decline a game of midnight chess. You exit into the courtyard, where the air is finally cooling. Your sleeves rustle gently in the breeze. You survived. The night, the bribes, the barbed compliments. You survived the wine. And you even pocketed a fan that, upon closer inspection, actually contains a good poem. That's rare. You slip it into your desk drawer when you return to your quarters. And lock it, just in case. The stars are awake now, but you're not even sure you're still conscious. You're floating somewhere between wakefulness and bureaucratic afterlife, seated at your candlelit desk while your knees quietly whisper protest to your spine. Officially, the day is over. Unofficially, it's night duty, that blurry realm where true problems sneak through, dressed in shadows and whispers. This is the hour when secret letters arrive. The first is slipped beneath your door by an anonymous hand. The paper is coarse, the handwriting practiced but rushed. You unroll it carefully. My cousin was unjustly punished for failing to deliver tax rice. The inspector never arrived, but marked him as absent. Please investigate quietly. He has enemies. You sigh. Quietly is not your specialty. Loudly, with receipts, is more your speed. But you fold the letter and slide it into your private file. It smells faintly of sesame oil. Interesting. Might narrow it down. Next, your steward knocks and murmurs. Night courier from the capital. The courier bows. Hand you a scroll sealed with black wax, a signal that the message is sensitive. You break it open and begin reading. It's vague, almost poetic. The southern grain routes must remain undisturbed. Monitor all port transactions. Send word if irregularities persist. You frown. This means someone is being watched and you're the eyes. Again, historians still argue whether Ming local officials were spies for the throne or simply data collectors with better paper. You know the truth. You're both. An administrator by day, a reluctant detective by candlelight. You pull out your grain records. Begin cross-referencing shipping logs. There's a bump in volume from the fourth village pier, subtle, but it could mean someone skimming off the top. You make a note. Dispatch Inspector Chun. Bring backup. An extra ink. The candle flickers as you work, casting monstrous shadows across your stacked scrolls. Somewhere outside, an owl hoots. Or maybe that's your assistant having a nightmare again. He insists he dreams in tax codes. Another knock. It's the gatekeeper this time. Pat Askew, breathing heavily. Apologies, he pants. There's a guest. At this hour? He says he's your uncle. Ah, not that uncle. He's here in full ceremonial robe. Even though it's nearly midnight, smiling the smile of someone who's about to ask you for a career-changing favor. On nephew, he beams. What a joy to see your name in the registry of fine officials. Uncle, I have a small request. A cousin's son, very bright, needs a placement. just a low post. Temporary. You inhale deeply. This is not a request. It is a veiled order wrapped in family pride. You hate this part because he helped pay for your exams, because he once nursed you through a fever with lotus broth, because saying no could ruin 2 households' worth of dumpling sharing history. So you nod. Send me his name. You say, I'll review his writing samples. The uncle bows like he just won a military campaign. He departs humming a tune you're pretty sure is about successful bribery. You groan and lean your forehead against the scroll rack. The bamboo slats are cool, comforting, judgmental. Another candle sputters out. You shift gears. Time to address the matter of the missing chord instruments. Apparently, someone's been stealing inkstones from the records room. It's not sabotage. It's pettier than that. They're expensive. They sell well on the back market. And someone in your office is either greedy, very clumsy, or obsessed with calligraphy. You compose an anonymous notice. Henceforth, inkstone inventory shall be checked daily. Any more losses will result in public inkstone accounting drills. Nothing terrifies a petty thief more than paperwork about their theft. Then, there's the business of the night patrol logs. You review them nightly, not because it's required, but because once you didn't, and a local smuggler disguised as a monk passed through the village with 4 crates of fireworks and 1 stolen horse. You now check every single patrol note. Tonight's entry. Quiet. River unusually loud. Dog stared at moon for too long. Investigated. Nothing found. Reassuring. You put it aside and stand. You need air. The courtyard is quiet. Lanterns sway gently, casting long orange trails over the stone path. The moon, half shy behind a veil of clouds, casts a soft sheen over the rooftop tiles. You walk slowly, breathing in the night's cooler rhythm. There's a moth tapping gently at a lantern. It reminds you of yourself, drawn endlessly to the glow of duty, even when it singes. You pause at the small ancestral shrine. You light a stick of incense and whisper, not a prayer, but a question. Am I doing this right? There's no answer, just the hiss of ash falling. But you feel heard. You return to your quarters. One last scroll waits, a poem from a student and signed. It's clumsy but sincere, about a tree and time and how bureaucrats are like roots, unseen but holding everything steady. You smile. You copy it into your notebook. You won't tell anyone. And with that, you allow yourself the rarest luxury. Sleep. No more ink. No more scrolls. Just the gentle creak of your cot, the cool brush of night air through the window, and the sound of paper finally still. You awake before dawn, not because you're well rested, but because the rooster has decided to announce his presence right below your window. Loudly, repeatedly, with the gusto of a court crier who just learned you're behind on your tribute paperwork. Your first thought? Why is there a rooster under my window? Your second? It's today. Report delivery day. That means couriers, officials, curious monks, overzealous messengers, and possibly a minor parade if the governor's secretary gets too excited about his new ceremonial umbrella. It also means you must look calm, presentable, and fully awake, which is unfortunate because right now your hair is doing something resembling rebellion and your left foot is asleep. You splash water on your face, tug on your court robes, crease free, thank the heavens, and begin the performance. Because that's what it is now, a performance. You eat 2 spoonfuls of rice congee, standing up, scrawl a half apology to the kitchen for skipping breakfast again, and head toward the front gate where the first courier is already pacing like a horse that's read too many schedules. He bows, hand you the seal packet. You break it open. Inside, a fresh set of directives from the provincial capital. The first reads, "Report on village well repairs overdue. Rectify immediately." You grit your teeth. You submitted that report twice. You suspect someone's pigeon got distracted mid-flight and dropped it in a pond. You make a note to recopy it. Again, the second reads, "Imperial astrologers recommend adjusting the tax calendar to align with favorable winds." You reread that sentence 3 times, hoping it makes more sense with repetition. It does not. You'll need to find out what favorable winds mean. Probably not metaphorically. Possibly involving pigeons again. Then comes the surprise. A personal summons. Not from your prefect. From the capital. Your name, there, in careful brushstrokes, requested to attend a conference on land regulation. This is not normal. You sit very still. Your steward, reading upside down over your shoulder, lets out a soft, "Oh no." This is either a compliment or a trap. Historians still argue whether such invitations were rewards for excellence or preludes to exile disguised as promotion. You suddenly find yourself wondering how much property costs in Inner Mongolia. But there's no time to spiral. The compound is already alive with rustling paper, shouting clerks, and one scribe who's misplaced his formal slippers. You take a deep breath and begin the morning briefing. Reports are assigned, complaints sorted, and someone's cousin shows up trying to sell you government-grade ink out of a handcart. You say no 3 times. By mid-morning, your desk has become the eye of the storm again. Petitions, policy drafts, and one very confused local monk who wants permission to name his goat after a general. You deny that one, politely. You also finalize your local reports, land assessments, crop forecasts, judicial summaries, and prep them for courier dispatch. You double seal everything, just in case that pigeon's still out there. As the final documents are bundled, you allow yourself one moment of pride. Everything is clean. Everything is accurate. Your calligraphy is flawless. Your statistics add up. There is no evidence that you once considered faking a spreadsheet just to get a nap. You hand the reports off with a bow and a warning glare. Do not drop them in any ponds. The courier nods solemnly. Only streams. You pretend not to hear that. By afternoon, the compound starts to quiet. The wave has passed. The scrolls have gone. The ghosts of bureaucracy will return tomorrow. For now, you allow yourself a walk. The garden is still, a few late cicadas rasping like dry brushes on old parchment. You pause beside the pond. The fish, miraculously, are still there. You count them. You make a note to reward the groundskeeper. You take a seat beneath the plum tree and exhale. It's a rare thing. A moment that isn't pushing you forward or demanding you answer something or wrap something in ribbon and protocol. Just a bench. Just air. Just you. You remember a quote from your old tutor. "The ink of a wise man must pause before it stains too far." Back then, you thought it was a warning against spilling ink. Now you understand. You linger in the shade until a servant brings word. Your horse has been saddled. You'll leave at dawn tomorrow for the capital. You nod, already rehearsing which robes to pack, which scrolls to carry, which officials to avoid eye contact with. But not yet. For now, you sit a little longer and watch the sky shift. And now, your day finally ends. You return to your quarters, feet heavier than ever, but your mind quiet in a way that's almost unfamiliar. You peel off your court robe, hang it with care, and wash your hands one last time, rinsing away the ink, the worry, the weight of 1,000 decisions scribbled in silence. The lanterns are low. The air has cooled. You open the shutters just enough to let in the soft hum of night. Crickets murmuring leaves rustling, the occasional sleepy grunt of someone in the scribe quarters dreaming about tax codes. You sit for a while beside the window, tea in hand, elbows on the sill. The moon rises like an old friend, pale and unhurried. Its light spills across the floor, catching on the corners of scrolls that can finally wait until morning. The bureaucracy will still be there. The officials will still argue. The ink will still dry. But tonight, just tonight, you are still. You slip beneath your woven covers. Let your head settle into the old, lumpy pillow that knows every complaint you've ever muttered into it. Somewhere, your steward blows out the last hallway candle. The room darkens. The hum deepens. You feel your breath slow, your shoulders loosen, your thoughts soften like rice left to soak. Tomorrow, you'll wake before the sun again. There will be another report, another rooster, another scroll asking why the wind taxes haven't been updated. But for now, the only thing required of you is this. Rest, sleep, dream, maybe of plum blossoms, or better fountain pens, and know as the moon slides across the tiled roof that for one day, just one, you did enough. You were enough.